She needed to be the one to come to her own conclusion and decisions.
As long as it's the one that I wanted her to make. That's not actually making her. How do you? Oh my God. Are you transphobic? Hey babies, welcome back to my channel. I'm David, you're David, we're all David, and today on Dismantling Hate, we're going to have a look at the YouTube channel called Genspect. And their description says, a healthy approach to sex and gender. What a treat. Can't wait. Okay, and the video in particular that we're going to watch is called My Daughter's School Transitioned Her Without Telling Me. Sorry, my daughter's school transitioned her without telling me, because it's all caps. That's what all caps means. January Littlejohn. I have no context because I haven't seen this yet, but we're going to watch that together right now. So I'm gonna slide my bad self on over, roll the intro, and let's get started. And like, it is walking the line of like freedom of speech. You know what? If we're gonna be out here and we're gonna be vulnerable on this channel here together, you and me, right now, right here, yeah. We should really be talking about that because that's harmful. All right, I'm ready. Are you ready? It's okay if you're not. We'll take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay because we're gonna do it together. Roll the transphobia. Can you see the colorful shirt I'm wearing? It's new. It's new. It's fun. There's holes. I love things with holes. I have, however, watched the first 8 seconds of this video and the mouth sounds are just off the charts. So if you don't like mouth sounds, I have lots of other videos that you can watch here on my channel. Okay, let's go.
First and foremost,
I'm sorry, that initial mouth sound. Did you hear it? Let's rewind the track. Play it back.
First and foremost, it is just an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. It's so funny to hear people come up to me and say, oh, you're the Twitter girl with the sign. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a story. I can't wait for you to hear it. So maybe this will give you some feedback and background onto why I hold that sign every day. So in the spring of 2020, at the height of COVID, our 13-year-old daughter came to us and told us she no longer felt like a girl. She had no previous signs of confusion in early childhood. So how did we get here? Our daughter, like so many of these other girls, was very vulnerable to this ideology for many reasons. First, she has ADHD and she's gifted. So for many of these girls, that reads like autism until their emotional intelligence catches up to their IQ. Jessie Ministo, who you just saw on the panel from Third Factor, talks about gifted girls feeling like an outlier. They sometimes can be overly sensitive, overfeel emotions, and can be seen as just too much at times. And that perfectly described our daughter. Jessie also uses the analogy dandelions versus orchids. So if you don't know what she's referring to, please look that up because our daughter is definitely a very rare exotic orchid. Our daughter tended...
Oh God, sorry. The mouse sounds are really just driving me up the wall. Do you know the dandelion versus orchid example? I don't know that. If you know what that means, let me know in the comments. Yeah, I have lots of things to say already, but I'm trying lately to collect my thoughts before I throw them all out there. So sure, what a great... Yeah, David, okay, come on. Yeah, lucky you. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's get the background here before we really start going in on January Littlejohn. Sorry, okay.
To perseverate on issues, sometimes for years, and she still does. And at the time, she was a very black and white thinker. She's an artist, musician, and into theater, like so many of these girls.
You said it, not me, sis. Okay.
Led her to websites like Scratch and DeviantArt, which is rampant with this ideology. She was also being influenced by book series, especially anime, and even music. Her favorite band at the time was Cavetown, which is a trans-identified singer. Lastly, and most importantly, she was a part of an in-person friend group at her middle school who was obsessed with LGBTQ identities. And for my daughter, who was desperately searching for a place to fit in and belong, having a friend group indoctrinate her into these identities, but also have these makeshift identities ready for you with colorful flags and pronouns. It was very enticing to her.
Okay, that's going to be my first stop right here. Okay, lots to unpack here, or dismantle, because, you know, the premise of the show. Her argument here so far isn't completely devoid of logic, because if you are somebody who is struggling with all the things that she's saying that her daughter struggled with, if you are dealing with anxiety, an attention disorder, if you're gifted, I don't know, that seemed like a humble brag to me. It would make sense that you would be searching for a group to fit into. It could make logical sense that you might join or assimilate yourself to queer folks in order to connect with them. I don't think that's outside of the realm of possibility in a lot of cases. Sure, that's possible, but I don't know if it's probable. Talking about this group of in-person friends, which was a weird way to say that, but talking about this group of friends as if they are obsessed with queer ideology, I think maybe they were just queer. I don't know, like, I don't really know any folks, and I've worked with a lot of kids. I'm a university educated teacher with lots of experience in the classroom. I've never met any identity obsessed children. I've never met anybody who solely focuses so much about a singular piece of their identity. It's not usually what happens. And it would make sense that if this woman's child was queer and up to and including potentially being trans, they would hold on to that queer group of friends a little bit tighter because they didn't have that support at home. It seems to me like January Littlejohn, if that is her name, I don't know if that's her name. It doesn't seem like a name, but your name could be January, sure. Littlejohn could be her name, whatever. Her talking about all of the pop culture, like her favorite band is trans and she's watching anime and she's on DeviantArt, because I feel like queerness, creativity, and liberalism is rolled up into this big burrito that's really hard to unravel from itself, because so much of queer culture is creative and so much of fine arts, so movies, music, dance, all of that stuff is inherently filled with liberal folks, because that's just usually how it goes. Like, if queerness didn't exist, so much of pop culture wouldn't exist. It's not indoctrination, it's just these people simply existing. And yes, there may be a trans singer, but their presence is not indoctrination. The mere presence of queer joy or trans joy, which a lot of these people get really upset up with that phrase. I don't know. There's lots going on. Let's keep going.
It gave her a sense of belonging and who she was. Everything surrounded around these flags and identities. That was the first question they would ask other peers that they came in contact with. What is your flag? What are your colors? What are your pronouns?
Okay, that's not a bad thing. I think there's a straight flag. Is there a straight flag? Kylie, is there a straight flag? I don't know. Everyone should have a flag. If you want a flag, go get a flag, girl. And if it doesn't exist, make it up. Because everything, in fact, is made up by human beings, just like you and me.
3 of her in-person friends, by the time our daughter announced her transgender identity, had also announced transgender identities. And as you all know, it no longer just means that you're identifying as the opposite sex. It can be non-binary, gender fluid, demi-girl, demi-boy. If you Google, I think there are now an infinite number of gender identities.
Like, okay, yes, it does, like, I'm finding it. I'm finding the kindness in my heart to extend to this human being on the screen right here. Like, yes, it does sound a little bit, for lack of a better word, sus, that your child started hanging out with these individuals and then they all came out as trans together. That might appear as a little bit beyond coincidence, but also the queer kids find each other. Right? When I was growing up, I just had my friends and they were just people that organically became my friends. And then as I grew up and started to develop my own sense of identity and figure out who I am as a person, I started to look back at my past of friends and thinking, wow, they were all queer and we had no idea why we became friends or why we liked each other. It's just because the queers naturally gravitate towards each other because it is nice to be with people who are like you. So it's not necessarily early indoctrination. Is it within the realm of possibility for people to be convinced of a gender identity that is not authentic to who they are? Absolutely. But the solution to that very problem is not less education, is not putting up more walls for people to transition in the name of safety, of keeping our kids safe from woke ideologies. That, in fact, in most cases, is going to do the opposite. Because if a child believes that they are trans, yes, they may not actually be trans, but if they believe that they are, and then there's all these walls up of, oh, you can't do that, oh, being trans is bad, queer ideology this, drinking Coca-Cola that, they're going to want it more. It's like when your parents say that you can't go out tonight, and now I really want to go out tonight. You know what I mean? If you have the option to do something, you'll be better prepared to weigh the pros and cons and make an actual informed judgment about something as important as your gender expression. It is something that's important. But when it comes down to it, as somebody who fits under the trans umbrella, hi, my name's David, they, I'm non-binary, it pays to advertise. Gender isn't something that's necessarily rigid and remains the same throughout your entire life as well. So there's not, in my opinion, there's not a lot of harm in letting kids explore gender in the same way that they explore everything else about the human experience. This isn't really the conversation of like going on hormones or seeking gender affirming healthcare or gender affirming surgeries or anything like that, because that can carry consequences with it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, so many healthcare professionals are involved in somebody's transition. There's a psychologist, there's a doctor, there's a surgeon, and all these people have checkpoints that a patient needs to meet in order to obtain those gender affirming services. It's not something that you can just willy-nilly, oh God, pun not intended. It's not something that you can just spur of the moment walk in and decide and get tomorrow. Like I couldn't go get bottom surgery tomorrow if I wanted to. It doesn't work like that. It's not something that can be a snap judgment. It's not. Okay, let's keep going.
So in our initial research, I am a licensed mental health counselor, and I was struck by how my training back in the late 90s and early 2000s was not a reflection of what I was seeing in my daughter's friend group. And
okay, let's just read this here. Our initial response: only one treatment option. All resources pointed towards affirming the false identity and contact with the school. Maybe she'll explain it. She didn't explain the last slide, so I don't really know. Only one treatment option. And two, like saying affirming the false identity, you're just operating under the fundamental idea that all identities around gender that aren't aligned with the sex you were assigned at birth as false. And that would be transphobic. Yeah, I said it. I hate to throw the T word around, but there we are. And contact with the school. So like I did say, I am a university educated teacher and I'm almost done my master's of education. So I'm not speaking to this from nowhere. And I have a lot of practice talking about gender identity when it comes to education as well. So I'm super interested to see where this is going to go.
I predominantly worked with adolescents and college-age students, and I did not have one client that was experiencing confusion over their sex.
Maybe they weren't telling you. It's hard because I fall into this fallacy as well, right? My experience is this, so that means it must carry validity throughout the entire human experience. And unfortunately, that is very fallacious. I just love saying that word. Don't you say it with me, fallacious. Just because you weren't relayed that experience from your clients doesn't mean that those clients were doesn't mean that those clients weren't experiencing those things. And she said just now that her education didn't prepare her for what she is currently seeing in the 21st century. So that wasn't an old joke. Okay, maybe it was an old joke. But she said that her education wasn't holding up to the standard of what she was seeing today in a contemporary context, which might mean that if she didn't have the education, then people weren't out there willing to talk about their gender dysphoria with somebody that didn't have the education to actually talk to them about it in an effective, appropriate way. It's very the snake eating its own tail here. Like, who came first? The transphobe or the transgender? No, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, but Kylie, leave that in because that's funny. I like that. That's good. Okay, let's keep going.
And I was trained in my graduate program. We were not even using the terms non-binary, gender fluid. It was non-existent.
Just because something is new doesn't mean that it's not valid or doesn't mean that it should be thrown away. How many new words are added to the dictionary every year? Like, language modifies and morphs over time. Do we not? Girly pop. Do we not know? Do we not know? Things change. Everything is made up. Everything is created from the mind of a human being. Including the Bible. Okay, I just had to... No, we're not getting into religion, but I just had to say it. Okay.
All of the resources pointed to only affirming these identities. I could not find an alternate treatment option, which struck me as very odd because part of my job as a therapist is to do differential diagnosis. And it did not seem like that was happening. The other thing that I observed right away is much of the coping mechanisms my daughter was using mimicked anorexic girls and what they would do. And so just like anorexia and eating disorders, how that is the tip of the iceberg and everything under the surface is really what leads to that diagnosis and that behavior, I really saw gender dysphoria is no different. So I was really confused as to why I was not finding an array of treatment options.
So, okay, just to clarify, she is comparing an ED to gender dysphoria. Interesting.
And intuitively, we did not feel affirming this false identity that came along so suddenly was the right choice for our daughter.
Suddenly to you, but maybe those things that your child was experiencing weren't sudden to them. Maybe they had been experiencing it for a long time and didn't have the language or capability to understand and explain their experience to you until they met peers who had similar experiences. Is it possible that they were influenced by those peers and actually weren't trans? Absolutely, like I said before. And I'm not going to say that again, but a lot of people in the comments really go after that. Not that I mind. You're driving my engagement, even if you hate me. Okay. No, David, stop being so sassy. We're 5 minutes in. Sweet Lord. Okay, get it together.
We also realized that she was simply confused. The more we talked to her, the more we realized there was no substance. She did not understand the things that she was asking for, like HRT, puberty blockers, top surgery, which of course they rebranded as a double mastectomy.
Like all of these things, yes, you do. It's not like you can't go onto hormone replacement therapy on a whim. And yes, your child can come to you and say, I want to go on HRT. And you're like, okay, bestie, well, we have soccer practice at 7, so we'll have to stop at the drugstore at 6 on the way there, and then we'll be good to go. No, there needs to be professionals involved. There need to be people who understand neuroscience and children and psychology. There needs to be all of these resources in place so people can actually be vetted for whether HRT is the best option for them in that moment. I don't disagree with that. I think all of those standards need to be in place for the best practice of healthcare for all things. But you standing up here and thinking that all trans people are just experiencing something similar to that of an eating disorder is absolutely asinine, and up to and including transphobia.
And she couldn't answer basic questions like, well, what do you mean you don't feel like a girl? What does it mean to feel like a boy or a girl? She couldn't answer any of these with real depth or knowledge of the topic. We went into the summer and things were getting worse, not better. My husband and I were really struggling to figure out how to best help her. So we enlisted the help of a mental health counselor. And as school was approaching, I reached out to the school as I had done so many times before. I am a stay-at-home mom, and so the vast majority of my time was spent volunteering in my children's schools. I was even volunteer of the year at this middle school. So I had no reason not to trust the school had my daughter's best interest. I was also a substitute teacher, just to give you an indication of how involved I was in my kids' schooling.
Yeah, because I think in the United States, you don't actually have to have an education degree in order to be a substitute teacher, or that's something that's left up to the school boards instead of the governmental body or the Ministry of Education state by state. So, because I don't think she has an ed degree. I don't think she talked about that. That's terrifying. That's terrifying. In Canada, you absolutely have to have, in most cases, an ed degree in order to be a substitute teacher. But again, some school boards can make the decision to bring on folks who are qualified in other areas to be a substitute teacher if there are so few subs around. So that's interesting.
Reached out to her homeroom teacher, and I let her know that my daughter may ask to be called by a different name. This is what's going on. We're doing our best to navigate this with a therapist within our home. We are not affirming this identity. In fact, I feel it's directly related to her friend group. And there are details about that communication that I can't go into because we are still in litigation with the school district. But the teacher...
Why are you in litigation with the school district when you should be focused on helping your child live the most happy life possible, up to and including if they are trans or not trans? That is a waste of time, and that shows a lot about her character, in my opinion.
Confided in was the LGBTQ advocate on campus. So I didn't hear anything further from the teacher. I had assumed, as I reached out to her, that it would be treated like a nickname. A couple of weeks later, my daughter got into the car and said, "Mom, I had a meeting at school today about my name." But it was weird because they asked me which restroom I wanted to use. My daughter was identifying as non-binary at that time. But again, she was confused. Her identity changed 4 times over 2 years.
So that actually doesn't matter. Like, as a child, really your only job in the world is to figure yourself out. I'm not even a child. As a human being, your whole job is to figure yourself out and who you are and what you like and all of the above. So the fact that your identity is malleable doesn't imply that none of them are true in the same way that I believe she is right here. Oh, this is hard because oof.
Just to give you an indication. As she told me this, I was shocked. As I stated previously, my daughter has diagnosed ADHD, so she has a 504 plan. And I know that they cannot implement a 504 plan without me being present and signing forms. So
a 504 plan, my guess here is I haven't been a classroom teacher for a year and I already forgot all the words. What is that called? A PIP? No. So if you're a teacher in Alberta, at least, and I believe in a lot of Canada, you need an IEP or an IPP. So an IPP, stop it, is an individualized performance plan, and an IEP is an individualized education plan. And those are documents similar to that of a report card, but they kind of preface the student in educational situations of how this student is expected to perform because of any range of diagnoses. And in most, if not all cases, I believe parents need to sign those plans, and there's IEP or IPP meetings up to 2 to 3 times a year, and it just is this extra layer of involvement with parents when it comes to differentiating any sorts of content for a student. So yes, that's probably true.
Very confused and shocked how they had a meeting with my daughter that I didn't know about, and I wasn't invited to or anything like that. So I immediately emailed the school counselor, and she called me back with the assistant principal. So immediately I knew something was off. And they said, "Mrs. Littlejohn, we cannot give you any information about the meeting we had with your child. They are now protected by a non-discrimination law."
Whoa. I love how she really harped on they, because they doesn't exist. It's not Adam and Eve, it's Adam and... God, none of my jokes are landing today, but it's probably entertaining. I don't know if you're still here. Thanks for that if you are. Okay, let's go.
Your only recourse is to go to the assistant superintendent, which I did.
Wow.
And phone calls and emails went back and forth for multiple weeks, and we were finally given an in-person meeting with the principal of the middle school. By this time, the first 9 weeks had just ended, to give you an indication of how long this took.
Yeah, everything does move at a snail's pace in education. It's true. I don't know if that's the best course of action for a school or a school board kind of like isolating the parent like that. But I can see it in her face and in her body language how she would act with educational professionals, and the fact that she is so blatantly being quite transphobic here online and in person to whoever's listening here. I don't hate that there's something in place to protect kids and their identity. Okay, so if we flip it to the other side and you're the teachers and you're the principal in this situation, you are not qualified to give any gender reassignment surgery. Like, of course, it sounds so stupid to say, but of course you're not providing HRT. Kids aren't getting estrogen in the schools. Are you kidding? Like, the only thing that you can do, and seemingly what they have done in this case, is just affirm the name and the pronouns of a student. And that, to me, isn't harmful. That's not harmful to me. It's not. I, in my opinion, I do believe, I am under the belief as such that it's not harmful. And in the case where it is pushing somebody farther down the path of gender identity that is not actually true and authentic to them because they are being influenced by the woke left and their favorite Icelandic rock band with a transgender singer and deviant art and manga, like, okay, I get it. I get where you're coming from. There is the potential for this to go to a place that it is not good and positive for a student. It is possible, but it's not probable. Ooh, I didn't think this was going to be so good today.
So at this meeting, we were shown the gender support plan.
Wow. What state is this girl and how do I move there? Okay.
Sorry. And I know one of the presenters yesterday had one of these plans. This is from Gender Spectrum. I wish I could show you my daughter's support plan, but because we are in litigation, that is part of the evidence. Because it would show you just how childlike her answers were and how the power difference.
You mean a child's answers were childlike? Shocking.
Must have been in that room with 3 adults consisting of an assistant principal, a school counselor, and a social worker I had never met, with my 13-year-old child behind closed doors filling out a 6-page transgender support plan.
And the way that she makes it sound so ominous too, like these adults were in a closed door and transgender support plan. Now that's a good band name.
My daughter, because she has ADHD, was emotionally 11 at that time.
Okay.
So as you see from this intake form, the process was you go to the school counselor, you say, I'm trans, and within 48 hours, they are required to set up a meeting. And I have circled the part where it says parent or guardian. Are they aware? And are they supportive? So this was the only question where they asked her, and that ultimately decided whether or not my husband and I would be notified.
Well, you said on stage that you weren't affirming this. In fact, she said that she called the teacher and said that she wasn't affirming the identity. Or it's not that this child just had to say, no, my mom doesn't affirm this. The teacher knew, and that definitely would have been passed on to administration as well. So it's not just this little moment where your child gets to say, nah, don't call my mom. Like, they knew. They been knew. They could probably read it on your child's face that their parents, look at me using inclusive language. She would hate that. Yeah, it's not that simple. It's not that simple.
Asked to come to the meeting. So at this meeting that they had with my child, this is the first page of the support plan. And as you see the word supportive again. And this word supportive, like so much of our language, has been hijacked by activism. It no longer means the same thing to everyone. So for instance, supporting a child in the reality of her natal body does not count as support to trans activists. The considerations portion of the plan is where they ask the child, would you like privacy from your parents? Meaning, when we speak to your parents, should we refer to you as your birth name and pronouns, or should we use your preferred name and pronouns? And this is to effectively deceive parents from knowing that these support plans and these social transitions have ever even occurred.
Now, I get it. I totally understand where she's coming from. And it does make sense. This is a really hard conversation, right? Because the parents do have the right to know what's going on at school with their children. But at the end of the day, I'm of the opinion that this woman is a transphobe, and that if this woman's child, if January Littlejohn's child is actually trans or non-binary or what have you, they deserve to freely and authentically express themselves. And that is the school's responsibility in order to keep this child safe. So it does make sense to me that there would be something in place, a policy in place, that this school would be able to protect this child when talking to their parents. And I understand what she means when she says it's deception, because it is. I don't know if it's like who's more important in this situation. Is it the wishes of the parents or the happiness of the children? Is it the wishes of the parents or is it the authentic expression of the students? Is it the discrimination of the parents or the authenticity of the student? Is it the, like, you know what I mean? I don't know if there's a right answer here. Well, I kind of do. In my province, it's called the Safe and Caring Schools Act. There are so many things in that government document that outline how, as teachers, as school bodies, you need to create an environment that keeps this student safe. And in this situation, this child might not be safe from their parents, not necessarily in a physical way at all. I'm not saying that, but in a mental, psychological space, I don't know if this child would be safer on their parents. And that's really sad. But the school needs to uphold the protection of students first. This is good. This is good. This is hard. This isn't an easy conversation with black and white answers. There's so much nuance that's required in order to make these decisions most effectively. I don't know what I would do in this situation. This is really interesting.
So again, you see the plan colludes with the child to reiterate
collusion
and cannot be aware of the child's confusion. This is an enormous amount of power they are giving to young children that are not equipped to handle it. This also really pits the child against her parents and sends a clear message that the parent authority is no longer wanted or needed.
Well, it's not the school pitting your child against you. You effectively did that yourself when you called the teacher and said, "Hey, bestie, we don't give a flying rip about our child's gender identity and what words they're saying to us because we don't listen to our children. Okay, thanks, bye, click." That is you driving a wedge between you and your children, not the school.
It also sent the message to our daughter that she needed to be protected from us and not by us.
Well,
this is the page where I almost came out of my chair during the meeting. This is where they asked the children which restrooms and showers they would like to use on campus and which sex they prefer to room with on overnight field trips.
Like, before she even gets into this, it's all gonna, I put my bets on that she's gonna make this all sexually charged, and this doesn't have to be sexually charged at all. You can make the choice of whether this is within a sexual nature. I think you'll understand what I mean when she starts talking. Again, I haven't seen this, but I almost guarantee I know where she's going to go with this, is that it's some nefarious thing to get into the locker rooms of the opposite sex because it's all a farce and they're just lying to get closer proximity to people that they're interested in sexually. But 13-year-olds don't know. They don't know. And I've said this before on this channel. Us as adults, those of us who are sexual beings, look at situations with a little bit of a different mindset because we have a conception of the act of sex. Now, children, hopefully, ideally, do not have that conception. They don't know what it is. They don't really know what it means. Sure, they might have internal feelings of what they're interested in and this and that, but ultimately they don't know all of that sexual context, and that is good. That's correct. It should be that way. From a moral and developmental standard, they shouldn't know what all of that entails. So us looking at this right? Talking about bathrooms and who you're overnighting with for trips and that. We look at that as human beings with an understanding of the act of sex have different eyes than how a child would read this and how this goes. Now, are there instances where there could be people with nefarious intentions? Absolutely. Are there exceptions to the rule that some folks who are very young and maybe even a student in schools across the world have an understanding of sex and might use programs and policies like this in order to gain access to the opposite sex because they're sexually interested in them? Absolutely, that's a possibility. But that's why there's psychologists involved. That's why there's counselors involved. So they can understand whether this student is coming from a place of earnest or whether this student is coming from a place of deception. And honestly, once you spend enough time around kids, it's not that difficult to figure out if a kid is trying to deceive you. It's really not. Most of them are pretty bad actors. And that's coming from a drama teacher. Oh, that sounded mean. But hey, I'm not the exception. I was a horrendous actor when I was a kid. Oh God, too real. Anyway, let's keep going.
All this is done under the guise of making a child feel safe at school. But if you really cared about the safety of a child, parents would immediately be included in these meetings every single time.
Like, I do think parents should be involved in this, but are you actually going to be involved, or are you just going to sit there and be like, no, because that's not your involvement. That's just you saying no, right? Huh. Wow.
Further, there was not one question on this plan about previous history of self-harm or suicidal ideation or potential abuse at home. Yet these are the exact reasons being constantly used to cut parents out of these critical decisions being made.
What?
This was never about the safety of these children.
What?
This plan created a huge wedge between us and our daughter. And shortly after this, her mental health spiraled.
It's very chicken or the egg. Why did her mental health spiral? I'll leave that up for you to decide.
So after the meeting, I was very angry. And we continued throughout this process to ask for legal justification that they had for meeting with our child without our notification or consent. And we were finally mailed this 28-page guide, the Leon County Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Gender Nonconforming, and Questioning Support Guide.
Wow, what a world we live in. I'm going to look that up right now as she keeps talking.
I've also included an Equality Florida Safe Space sticker that you can see all over Leon County schools, even in the elementary schools. As part of this guide, there was a Q&A, and this is part of the Q&A. So it says misgendering is considered harassment.
Oh my God, this is so beautiful. Misgendering is considered harassment. I would believe this. Leon County, where is this? There's a whole 16-page document in here. This is fascinating. Where are you? Florida. Of course it's Florida. These people really hate the liberal states. Oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger? No, that's California. Anyway, I live in Canada, so I don't know. Wow. Oh God, catch me moving to Florida. Wow. Love that. Anyway.
So student harassment is a firing offense for teachers and staff. This sent a clear message. Comply or lose your job.
Well, yes.
A student has exhibited behavior in school leading administrators or teachers to believe the student is LGBTQ+. Should the parents or guardians be notified? No. Outing a student, especially to parents, can be dangerous to the student's health and well-being.
Yes. Speaking facts, January Littlejohn.
Outing students to their parents can literally make them homeless.
Yes.
So parents who love
I've literally had friends that have been kicked out because of their gender identity or their sexuality. It is absolutely true. Out of the youth that are homeless, queer youth make a large amount of that number.
Children more than anyone else, who are ultimately responsible for every part of their care, are being painted as enemies to their own children with no due process.
You don't get due process when you're discriminatory, though, is the thing. I understand it. Like, what she's saying is correct. Like, you are responsible for your children. You should be involved with everything that they do. Like, you are the be-all, end-all for your children. I get that. You have that legal responsibility and right. But not if you're discriminatory.
So I started to research these guides and wondered if other Florida schools had these guides. And all roads led to an organization called Equality Florida. Equality Florida.
That's so funny because I follow them on Instagram.
Launched their Safe Schools program in 2016. And a part of that program was to do outreach to schools. They had what was called a Safe Schools Equality Index. And it was essentially a checklist that they would give each school going into the school under the guise of anti-bullying and anti-discrimination. And they asked them, how best are you protecting your LGBTQ students? Well, what school doesn't want to protect all of their students? And so this checklist would go through different checklists of, do you have a guide? Do you have an implemented support plan protocol? And do you have a GSA club? Or do you have inclusive materials? Have you done professional training with every staff member on your campus? And so there would be these next steps depending upon the answers to that survey.
Okay.
And as you can see on this graph, the green is deeply embedded LGBTQ support, including professional development. The yellow was LGBTQ professional development, and the red, which equaled bad, no professional development. And so, what is that, 4 counties out of 67 that they had not infiltrated?
The language, like embedded, infiltrated, like, get a grip, girl.
So what I realized is all of the major counties in Florida had these LGBTQ guides. Some of them were over 100 pages long, but they all had the same policies. And I say policies, but they were really de facto policies because they were called guides for a specific reason. Guides do not have to go through school board approval. Policy does. So these guides never saw the light of day. So many parents were completely in the dark and unaware that this had been used to train every staff member in Leon County schools, but they never knew.
I mean, if you were that involved of a parent, couldn't you just look that up? Like on the school board website or on the school website? Catch me on the school board website reading through all of their documents, right? Like I found that in 10 seconds. Why couldn't you as a parent find that? I don't know. So
after a year of trying to resolve this issue with our school district, we made the difficult decision to go public with our story and file a federal lawsuit against the school district.
Oh, yeah, because that's going to improve the quality of life of your child who's already clearly struggling with you.
It's not all good news. So in December of 2022, the federal judge dismissed our case because it didn't reach the threshold of shocking the conscience, and we have now appealed his ruling to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Shocking of the conscience. Is that a real legal term? Do you know that? Let me know in the comments if you know.
I want to switch gears to how we walked our daughter through this confusion. So as I was actually searching for answers with the school policies and what was going on the school level, I was also searching for how best to support my daughter and help her through this. And I did a deep dive into this issue because I wanted to see with my own eyes what was convincing these children that they were born in the wrong body and to reject their body. And
you already told us it's the Icelandic rock band and anime.
Richie said in Jennifer's documentary coming out, it was all affirming their self-hate. And I couldn't understand why people were celebrating this and clapping our daughter along this path of self-harm.
The she, hers, and daughters are really getting to me. Even I know to reference this child as a child or they, them.
She received so much positive attention from teachers and friends, and it felt like we were the only ones trying to protect her from medical harm. Because when you pull back the curtain from what is gender-affirming care, most people are horrified to learn that they are sterilizing vulnerable children, destroying their body with cross-sex hormones, and disfiguring surgeries.
I just, there's nothing new here really to say. I've said this earlier. It's not just done to your child. There are people involved in the process, and people can, and people under the age of 18 can seek out gender affirming care. I don't really know how old they have to be, and depending on your jurisdiction and that, but if you don't have the support of your parents, you can still seek out developmentally appropriate, in my and many professionals' opinion, of gender affirming care, even without the presence of a supportive parent in your life. It's not disfiguring surgeries. It's not the sterilization. This extreme kind of language is used to shock the conscience. I'm using her own language. It's just, unfortunately, even though you do have so many rights when it comes to being a parent, at the end of the day, you do not have complete control over what your child does with their body. To some extent, there has to be a moment where a child gets to make decisions for themselves. And whether you fight and take them to federal court, not your child, but the school district, you can fight and make a scene in a federal court of law and go public with your story, which is going to be hurting your child more than being trans ever would. Is that actually bringing you closer to your child? Which is seemingly your goal. At some point, your child has to be able to make decisions for themselves. But you can make all of those things possible and defer your child's sense of autonomy when it comes to their own body to the age of majority, or 16 or 18 or whatever that is. But ultimately, they are going to grow into an adult that is going to do what they want with their body. So yes, there is this gray area of you are the parent, you are in charge. This is a child under the age of the majority in your care. But why aren't you listening to your child? Isn't the most probable answer here that your kid is trans? Is that really so hard to stomach? Do you believe that any people are trans? Because if the answer is no, then you're transphobic and you're discriminatory. And that, unfortunately, isn't really going to bring you any happiness. It's not. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's actually going to lead to an incredibly difficult life for you and your child. And your child should be number one. Why isn't your child number one? And this is sad.
And this is all based on self-ID. That's what struck me to be the most ethical of all. There's no test to determine if a child will persist or desist in their gender dysphoria. And when else do we follow a child's lead into medical harm in the medical profession? We don't.
Always? Isn't there always a verbal conversational component to literally everything? Hi, my name is David and I'm a certified level B assessor in the province of Alberta. So all that means is that I can do assessments with kids that look for signs of attention disorders or autism or things like that. I cannot prescribe medication, not even close to that. I took one university level class that may be a certified level B assessor, but there's always, no matter what, there's always a verbal conversational component to an assessment. So you talking to your kids, you getting like firsthand verbal information from a student, from your child, is always a part of the equation. But it doesn't surprise me because she doesn't listen to her child. So, yikes.
So initially, the only thing that I could find was this very archaic gender critical forum that many parents in the room may know what I'm talking about, because this was before Genspect. This was before Abigail Schreier's book had come out. And so a lot of the parents that I encountered initially, they were very paranoid, and there's really no other way I could describe it. Most of them used a pseudonym. They wouldn't give me their real name. They actually thought my name was a pseudonym, which was kind of funny. I was like, no, that's my real name. Like, are we not all doing that? I don't understand.
It does seem fake.
And so we ultimately came to the realization that our daughter was confused and she needed us to parent her through this.
What do you mean ultimately? You've been saying that from the beginning.
She didn't have the capacity to understand the things that she was asking for.
Okay, yeah, if a 13-year-old is asking for bottom surgery, sure, I can agree with you. Maybe in some contexts, yes. But a 13-year-old asking for a different pronoun at school? No, completely disagree. You have the capacity to know what you would like to be called. Again, it just comes down to listening to people. It comes down to communication, and those skills are really lost.
And I knew that I had time on my side. Unlike so many of these parents whose children fall prey to this when they're in college or 17 and they're working under this, critical deadline, my daughter was 13. So in order to help her, I had to put my fear aside and reframe this issue. I had to pretend, instead of her asking for puberty blockers and binders, that she was asking for a new outfit, or that was, inappropriate, or a tattoo. Things that I would have no problem setting healthy boundaries with.
Oh, God. Again, the comparisons to being trans is getting a tattoo or having an eating disorder. That really just blows my mind.
And I knew that she just needed the gift of time, like so many of these other kids do, because as you all know, the vast majority will desist with the pathway of watchful waiting.
Ugh, what an awful sentence. Yeah, show me the receipts. I want to see it. Like, where does that come from? I'm sure lots of people walk down the pathway of whatever the hell she just said, but I don't think that's the majority. It's absolutely possible, and I know that happens, but it's not probable. It is possible.
I also knew I wasn't going to be able to talk her out of this. She needed to be the one to come to her own conclusion and decisions.
As long as it's the one that I wanted her to make. That's not actually making her... How do you... Oh my God.
And in order to do this, we had to repair our relationship with her.
Okay.
And restore trust.
Yeah, it probably went super well considering the fact that you're still using she, her pronouns. I want to know where this child is now. How long ago was this? Can we have an update? Is your child okay? I hope they're okay. Long pause.
So, one of the first things that we did is I knew that she was...
Okay, this is literally giving so culty right now. Like, okay, disconnect from existing influencers. Oh, so you're isolating your child? Red flag, red flag, red flag. Set clear boundaries, unconditional assurance of love, as long as you're not trans. As long as you do exactly what I want and how I want it. That's not how parenting works. That is not... Ooh, this is rank. I am having the best time, though. And if you're still here, it stands to reason, I would think, that this probably matters to you as well. And I take so much pride in being able to sit down and logically talk myself through these arguments. And I'm so glad that you're here, too, and are garnering some sort of enjoyment from this video. So I really thank you for being here, because this really matters to me. And if it really matters to you... I'm glad you're here. So thank you. This is a lot. Okay, we have 7 minutes left. Let's keep going.
This constant bug in her ear telling her that we did not love her because we did not affirm the trans identity. Well, so we had to immediately combat that. We assured her we loved her unconditionally and that would never change. And we started to ask questions out of a place of curiosity and compassion instead of judgment.
Okay, that should have been from the start. And hey, I don't think that this parent is necessarily malicious in nature. I think it's probable that this parent thinks that they're doing the best thing for their child. I do believe that, but it still is ill-informed, in my opinion.
We wanted to get her really thinking about this ideology and get her to see the contradictions in it, because she's a very bright girl, and I knew that she could get there with just a little bit of nudging. I avoided her name or her preferred name and used pet names instead, and I never used her preferred name or pronouns. We also knew we needed a new environment, and we initially tried to pull her out of school, but we were turned down by 2 private schools in the area. So we did let her finish out the school year at that school and then pulled her and put her in a private school. Lastly, I tell parents, and I myself had to practice a lot of patience. There is no straight line out of this, and it takes a long time. And so I didn't read into clothing and hair and makeup and jewelry, because if you do that, you yourself are falling back into this gender stereotype trap, because we know that clothing, hair, and makeup does not make our female child any less female. But sometimes
No, I can agree with that. Sure, clothing does not make your gender. Yes.
Sometimes we're looking for like these signs. Oh, is she desisting? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? It does not make sense. It's not logical, parents. So with a new school came new leadership at that school that respected our parental authority. I tell parents that if the school does not respect that you have the ultimate authority over your child and will not respect your wishes, get them out. This is a
Yes, I get it. I understand it. But talk to me in 20 years when you're put in a nursing home, and not a good one at that, because you probably won't have a good relationship with your children after they don't have to talk to you anymore because of what you put them through, if they in fact are trans.
Ideology, and it takes radical steps to pull your child out of this. I did not believe that at the time, but I absolutely know it's true now. We did not allow her to rewrite her past with lies. A lot of these kids do this. And so we would gently remind her ways that she was comfortable in her sex growing up. We showed her photos. We also told her that we loved her and showed her concrete ways that we show her that from the time she was born till right now. We cut off the contact with trans influencers. That was one of the most important things that we did. We conveniently made her unavailable when they asked her to do things.
What do you mean asked her to do things? What is that even? What? It's just, without providing the context, it makes it seem nefarious, and that's the point.
Took her iPhone. I do not believe any child under the age of 16 should have a smartphone.
You know what? I'm finding it hard to disagree with that. Maybe not 16, maybe 15 or 14. I don't know. But kids, tweens, no. You don't need. You just no. Focus on being a child. You don't need Instagram. That I can get on board with, but not to keep them isolated from trans people existing. Good Lord.
And we made sure that she didn't see it as punishment. We told her we made a mistake, that you are not emotionally ready. And we used that opportunity as to do a technology reset for the whole family so she did not feel singled out. We pre-screened every person she came in contact with, from hairdressers, youth pastors, art teachers, because we need to ensure that they were not going to have her go backwards. And that's the other thing, is sometimes you feel like it's 2 steps up.
Can you imagine if I was a hairdresser and a parent came to me and they're like, hey, are you transphobic? Because if you're not, you can't cut my child's hair. That would be so wild. I would get out of my salon. I don't even cut hair. That's so wild to me. And like, as a parent, you should be vetting everybody that comes into your child's life regardless, but not for their stances on gender. Oh God. This is
and 5 steps back, but you have to remember that you are making progress. So I have to hurry now. Signs of desistance. Re-engagement and affection. That was one of the first things that we saw with our daughter. She wasn't holed up in her room on her phone because she didn't have a phone. So she came downstairs and she was, her mood was more improved. She started to healthy question friends' trans identities, not her own. That came later. But she was certainly questioning theirs. Like, how could this happen that everybody's trans? I'm the only one that's trans. Reverting back to their given name, she may start wearing clothing from before the trans identity. I also noticed...
Like, sure, if your child isn't trans and that was just a phase, I hate that. If you're just listening to this, I did air quotes, just a phase. But that also might just mean that your conversion therapy worked. For now. Because conversion therapy does not work long term. So yeah, sure, you may have shoved your child back into a little box of their gender role, but eventually, hopefully, ideally, they will find their authentic selves. And you might have just pushed your child farther back in development by doing this. Maybe that child wasn't trans and maybe they needed this. I don't know. It's a hard conversation, but I don't think that she's doing what she thinks she is.
That with a lot of these girls during times of stress or their menstrual cycle, they will revert back to the trans identification and pick fights, and it becomes a power struggle. So just be aware of that. So this is a warning to parents. Even if your child desists, you are not out of the woods. This was something I had to learn the hard way. Those root issues that made your child vulnerable to this ideology,
You mean them being trans?
are still there. And they need to be identified and resolved for as long as it takes. These are the resources we found to be helpful to get our daughter to desist. Please take a photo because I'm going to go quick. This is not an exhaustive list, and if you want a long list, you can look on.
Oh God, did she just fill out my content calendar for the next 18 years? I can't with this.
No Harm's website for the
When Harry Became Sally, that is a...
page of protecting children from gender ideology. So lastly, I want to leave you with hope.
Oh, good.
And that's what most of us parents need.
Yep.
I know this ideology is relentless and it does not discriminate, and it is literally
Like you.
tearing families apart. This is a very isolating very isolating issue for parents, and I had never felt more alone during this. But you are not alone. I chose this photo for a specific reason.
Yeah, because it says hope.
There's a parent that I know with an estranged child, but not by their choice.
Ooh, estranged children. I have a video on that. It's really long. It's like 2 hours. It's a good one. It's a deep dive. Go watch that if you're interested in estranged adult children.
And they have created a rock
And that's going to be her in a handful of years, in my opinion. It's most probable.
garden in their backyard where they pray over the names of trans-identified children from a support group.
No.
It started with one rock, and they now have over 350.
Oh, God.
Laura Beth Perry, now Laura Smalt, said, "When you get tired of the lies, you don't go to those who were willing to lie to you. You turn back to the ones willing to tell you the truth, no matter what the consequences were." So parents, even if your child is still caught up in this awful ideology, please rest assured that you've done everything that you could to protect them from medical harm and to hold them in truth from a place of love and compassion.
Like,
Just
okay,
like-
medical harm or psychological harm? Because what?
Transitioners, you all are the victims and heroes of this medical scandal, and I thank you.
Okay. I feel like I have googly eyes after that one. Okay, girls. That was super interesting. Again, I don't think there's really like clear-cut and definite answers, but I think the clear-cut answer, yeah, look at me, accept trans folks. They do exist. They are real. It's not a nefarious ideology that is infiltrating schools. And there should be policies in place to keep people safe from discrimination, even if that comes from a parent. The number one thing that I learned is that I'm moving to Florida, girl. No, that's not. But yeah, really fascinating video today. I thank you for joining me. If you're interested in more commentary from me, I have lots of other Dismantling Hate videos. The playlist will roll up here on the end screen here in just a few seconds. There's 53 videos that you can watch on there at this point. This is number 54. I have a podcast called Talk with David Day. I have a vlog series called Does Size Matter? I got a lot. I'm everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, if you're interested, you can find me all over there. Please let me know what you think in the comments. If you like the video, like the video. If you're gonna leave a comment and disagree with me, I think that's fine. But if you're like weird, what do I mean by weird? If you're discriminatory and trying to be like rude and mean on purpose, obviously I'm not going to respond to that. Or I might just give you a little cheeky response because you're acting silly online. That's tough. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be really interested to know. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see other videos from me. I have new Dismantling Hate videos that come out every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Yeah. That's it for me. Thank you so much for getting to the end. If you're still here, my God, this must mean a lot to you. And I really appreciate that because this means a lot to me too. So thanks for spending this last hour with me. I really do appreciate you. And until the next one, goodbye. And like, it is walking the line of like freedom of speech. You know what? If we're gonna be out here and we're gonna be vulnerable on this channel here together, you and me, right now, right here, yeah. We should really be talking about that because that's harmful. All right, I'm ready. Are you ready? It's okay if you're not. We'll take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay because we're gonna do it together. Roll the transphobia.